This is the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So what keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night? That's the question we asked around here at Zion a few weeks ago and got lots of answers. And to those answers, we are letting the Scriptures speak and shed light on the darkness of our fears and our questions. We've talked over the last couple of weeks about Jesus and our work, and Jesus and our families. And today we'll think about another thing that might keep us up. And let's call it this: our nation. What's going on in our nation is a concern for many. Under the heading of our nation, we can put lots of related worries. Some worry about the tragic news that so dominates our airwaves. Others worry about the political battles over different and difficult topics like immigration or guns or human rights. Many worry about the climate of deep disagreement among leaders that trickles down into deep disagreement and hostility among citizens. And beyond these specific issues, I think many of us lose sleep over the suspicion that the world is getting more chaotic, more unstable, more mean-spirited. And we wonder what the future of such a world is going to be. These are big worries, big problems. But Jesus never steered away from a big problem. The truth is, the good news is, that Jesus cares about our nation. Not only our nation, all nations for sure, but about the particular things we face, we fear. Jesus cares. How do we know? Well, we know that God so loved the world that God gave his only Son, Jesus. Did Jesus foresee, do you think, what the world would become? Could Jesus imagine the chaos and the instability and the spirit of things? What they would be like everywhere? What they would be in our own nation? Well, I'm not sure. But Jesus did love the world. Jesus still does. And Jesus has a vision for how the world can be as it lives in him. I think that's what Jesus is getting at when he told the disciples, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus told the disciples this while he was still with them. He wanted them to know he wouldn't be with them forever. And the world that they were going to need to live in after Jesus was gone was going to be chaotic and unstable and mean-spirited at times. And so how were the disciples to live in this world? With love. With love for one another. This was to be the sign, the badge, the way of life that would show they belonged to Jesus. What would prove they were Christ followers? Well, not power, not being right about the issues, not winning arguments, but by love, by loving one another. This is in fact the astonishing thing about the kingdom that Jesus proclaims. It's a kingdom that has love at its heart. First, the love of Jesus, the love of God that sent Jesus into the world for you and me. And second, the love that Jesus calls us to live out in His name, the love in us through which God is transforming the world. Jesus cares about our nation. How do we know that? Because He makes us instruments of love here, where we are, in our nation, in our neighborhoods, among each other. And that is a magnificent and a daunting task. The truth is, in our nation, sometimes it seems we do not know how to love one another. Leaders jockey for political leverage. News shows us the worst sides of people. Strangers incite hate with those who they disagree. But Jesus has an answer to all of this. A solution to these things that keep us up at night. And it is this: to love one another. Jesus wants us to love one another, to be a sign for the world, to model the way, to be the light and love our nation and all nations need. Several years ago, on a Reformation Sunday, I had this God moment. It was a few minutes before worship was supposed to start, and I was feeling kind of unhappy about my sermon. I wasn't good enough, that sermon. I thought it didn't hit all the marks. And I was brooding about that, and I was staring out a window looking out at the parking lot. And I saw this older member of the congregation struggling to get out of the car. And then another older member who happened to be walking by, stopped and offered a hand, and then an arm, and together they made their way inside. And in that moment I realized these people are going to be okay. Your sermon may not be good, but they know how to love one another. Jesus says, by this, the world, the nations will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. This is how the risen Jesus comes, in acts of love, in moments of grace. And God knows we need more acts of love and moments of grace. We can't really control what's going on in our nation, can we? But we can control who we will be and how others will see us. And so what would it take for others to say about us, they are the ones who love one another?